Detective Sokolov got the case late Friday evening. The client's name was Mikhailo Doroshenko, 52 years old, construction contractor. Money wasn't a problem. Sleep clearly was. He placed a photograph on the table. A young man, 23, dark hair. The kind of smile people have before life teaches them anything cruel. My son, Artem, he said quietly. He disappeared 8 days ago. Sokolov picked up the photo. The police? Mikhailo gave a tired shrug. Adult male. Voluntary disappearance. They closed it after 3 days. Why do you think it wasn't voluntary? Without answering, Mikhailo slid another photograph across the desk. A girl. Dark eyes. Beautiful. Alive in the way photographs sometimes preserve people forever. On the back, written in black ink. Katya. Deceased. His girlfriend died 7 months ago, Mikhailo said. After that, he changed. Then he disappeared. I think she somehow. He stopped speaking. Sokolov leaned back slowly. You think a dead girl is connected to your son's disappearance? Mikhailo looked away. I know how it sounds. Tell me about her. Katerina Lisova, 22 years old. University student. Quiet. Calm. Smart. She met Artem 2 years earlier. Mikhailo never trusted her. Couldn't explain why. Just one of those instincts people learn not to ignore. 7 months ago, she died in a car accident. Night highway. Rain. Wet asphalt. She was supposedly alone. After the funeral, Artem locked himself away for weeks. Barely spoke. Barely left the apartment. Then suddenly he changed again. He started leaving the house late at night. Taking mysterious phone calls. Buying things that hadn't been there before. And 1 week before disappearing, he told his father something strange. Dad, there are things I can't explain yet. But everything's going to be okay. Then, 8 days ago, he vanished. His clothes remained. His passport remained. His laptop remained. Only Artem and a small backpack were gone. Sokolov started where he always started. The crash site. He drove there early the next morning. The road stretched empty beneath gray skies. Straight road. Good asphalt. No dangerous curve. And the tree she supposedly crashed into stood almost 20 meters away from the highway. 20 meters. On wet pavement, maybe. But on a straight road? Sokolov stood there silently for a while. Then took photographs. Made notes. And drove away. The morgue records bothered him. So Sokolov called an old acquaintance, a pathologist he trusted. They met in a small cafe near the hospital. Sokolov slid the file across the table. The man looked at the name, then at the date, and went quiet. Too quiet. I didn't handle the case personally, he finally said. But I remember it. What was unusual about it? The pathologist rubbed his thumb against the coffee cup before answering. The identification was mostly based on documents and personal belongings. Sokolov narrowed his eyes. And the body? Facial trauma. Severe. DNA confirmation? The man shook his head slowly. Not officially. That was all he said. But it was enough. Sokolov sat in his car afterward for nearly 10 minutes. Identification by documents. Destroyed face. No DNA test. Either it was a tragic accident, or someone had planned this very carefully. Next stop, the university. Katerina Lisova had officially withdrawn from school 3 weeks before the crash. 3 weeks. Not after. Before. Sokolov requested names of classmates. One stood out immediately. Alya. They met in a cafe that afternoon. Alya arrived nervous. But Sokolov knew how to make people feel safe. He asked about Katya. At first, Alya smiled while talking about her. Said she was intelligent, quiet, kind. Then her expression changed. A month before the accident, she became different. How? She looked scared. Alya hesitated before continuing. One day I noticed bruises on her wrist. She said she fell. Did you believe her? No. Sokolov stayed silent. People reveal more inside silence. Alya stared out the window. She once told me something strange. What exactly? She said, there are people you should never stand in the way of. Sokolov watched her carefully. And now? Do you know what she meant? Alya didn't answer. That answer was enough too. Later that evening, Sokolov returned to Mikhailo Doroshenko. This time, he asked about business. Construction contracts. Government tenders. Competitors. Mikhailo answered carefully. Too carefully. There's always conflict in this business, he said. But nothing serious. Names, Sokolov replied. 3 names. He wrote down every one of them. Then casually asked. Katya's father. What did he do? Mikhailo frowned slightly. Construction too, I think. Maybe engineering. Sokolov nodded slowly. And left. Katya's father was named Viktor Lisovii. It took Sokolov less than an hour to understand why that mattered. 5 years earlier, Lisovii owned a small construction company. Then came a massive municipal project. A tender worth enough money to change someone's life. Lisovii won it. At first. Then suddenly the results were challenged. The contract disappeared, and another company took over. That company worked directly with Mikhailo Doroshenko. After that, Viktor Lisovyi's business collapsed slowly. Debt, lawsuits, property sales, bankruptcy. And during that same period, Katya reduced her university schedule and started working part-time jobs. Sokolov sat there staring at the files. A girl whose father lost everything because of one man. A girl who later fell in love with that man's son. A girl who spent 2 years close to the family and then staged her own death. That wasn't coincidence. That was strategy. The only question was why. Then he remembered the bruises. There are people you should never stand in the way of. Someone pressured her, threatened her, or maybe someone realized she was gathering information. Sokolov called a police contact and asked him to quietly run one of the 3 names Doroshenko had mentioned earlier. The quietest name. Those were always the dangerous ones. The answer arrived the next morning. Sergei Radchenko. Officially, he and Doroshenko no longer had ties. Unofficially, 3 years earlier they had co-owned a company together. The partnership ended abruptly. Official reason: financial losses. Real reason: Radchenko discovered how the tenders were being manipulated. Fake signatures, pressure, bribes, rigged approvals. He walked away and stayed silent. But silence is dangerous, because people who know secrets can always start talking. Sokolov leaned back in his chair slowly. If Katya discovered the same thing, then she was never a threat to Artem. She was a threat to Artem's father. And suddenly everything made sense. Sokolov drove to Viktor Lisovyi's apartment that evening. Small apartment, old building, the kind of place where disappointment settles permanently into the walls. The man who opened the door looked 20 years older than he really was. Sokolov introduced himself and mentioned Artem Doroshenko. For several seconds, Viktor said nothing, then quietly stepped aside. Come in. He truly didn't know where they were. Sokolov could feel that immediately, but Viktor told him something far more important. 2 months before the accident, Katya came to him carrying documents. Copies of contracts, messages, tender records, forged signatures. She had spent 2 years collecting evidence quietly while living beside Artem. She wanted to expose them, Viktor said softly. She wanted justice. Why didn't she? Because I stopped her. The old man lowered his eyes. I was afraid. He laughed bitterly. I had already lost everything once. A week before the crash, Katya called him. She told me they were threatening her. Sokolov listened carefully. She said, Dad, I know what I have to do. Don't look for me for a while. That was the last time he heard her voice. Then came news about the accident. Viktor went to identify the body, or what remained of it. Did you recognize her? Sokolov asked quietly. A long silence filled the apartment. Then Viktor answered. No. Another silence. But I signed the papers anyway. Why? The old man looked directly at him for the first time. Because if my daughter was alive and hiding, then officially being dead was the safest thing I could give her. Sokolov sat in his car afterward, staring through the windshield while rain slowly gathered on the glass. A father signing the death certificate of his living daughter to save her life. A daughter carrying revenge and love at the same time for 2 entire years. And Artem, the boy trapped between them all. A boy who eventually learned the truth and chose her. Sokolov knew one thing now. Katya never intended to disappear forever. People who spend years collecting evidence always plan for the final move. So he called a journalist he trusted. He explained the tender scheme, the fake contracts, the names. The journalist stayed silent for almost a minute, then finally asked, Do documents actually exist? Sokolov looked out the window. Yes, he said quietly, and I think they're already on the way. 4 days later, an anonymous package arrived at an online media office. Emails, financial records, copies of contracts, forged signatures, everything, detailed enough that nobody could deny it anymore. The story exploded online Thursday morning. By Friday, prosecutors officially opened an investigation. And suddenly Mikhailo Doroshenko's empire started cracking. Sokolov called him afterward. Your son is alive, he said calmly. I don't know where he is, but he left willingly. Silence. Then breathing. Heavy breathing. Sokolov continued. Do you remember a municipal tender from 5 years ago? The silence became even longer. Finally, Sokolov spoke one last time. You should find yourself a very good lawyer. And he hung up. That night, he sat alone in his office thinking about Katya Lisova, 22 years old. For 2 years, she loved a man whose father destroyed her family. And somehow, the love had been real. That was the part Sokolov couldn't stop thinking about. Artem brought her coffee while she secretly hid evidence. They watched movies together while she planned how to destroy his father's empire. He told her he loved her, and she told him the same. And somehow both things were true. At the same time, Sokolov realized then that this story had never really been about revenge. It was about survival. 2 weeks later, his phone buzzed late at night. Unknown number. 3 words. Thank you. We're safe. Sokolov stared at the message for a long time, then typed back slowly. Take care of each other. No response ever came. Outside, rain began falling across the city again, and Sokolov sat quietly by the window thinking about all of them. About a father who declared his daughter dead to protect her. About a girl who carried fear, love, and patience inside herself for years without breaking. About a young man who learned the truth and chose the person he loved over the blood he shared. Sokolov originally thought he was investigating a missing person. Instead, he uncovered a debt that had finally been paid. Not through violence, not through murder, but through patience. And 2 years of silent work by a girl who knew exactly what she was doing.